Hello, I'm James Mayer, and today I'm with Adrian Bridge at the Yeatman Hotel in Porto for a new I Love Douro interview in partnership with Grape Discoveries. Adrian Bridge, good morning.
Good morning, James.
You've just been showing me around the world of wine, which is due to open in only 5 weeks' time on the 31st of July. Can you tell me what the world of wine will bring to Porto and to Portugal?
Well, so the world of wine is a grouping of experiences. So it's really a cultural centre that cover a range of topics that are not just connected to wine, in fact. So in many ways, World of Wine, which shortens to WOW, we're kind of saying we're putting the wow in the destination.
Right.
And that is to say that here in Porto, which is a beautiful city, for whatever historic reasons, there are not a lot of museums and experiences. And so, I think it's important nowadays that tourists have things to do. Content is critical. And particularly, I think, more so almost now that we have had this coronavirus, because the sort of people who are now beginning to travel again are the ones who are more adventurous. They're the ones who want to go learn, they want to go and have experiences. And that's really what it is. It's a grouping of experiences.
Yes, you described the world of wine as a museum experience. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, I think the balance between a museum, which seems to be quite static and full of exhibits, and an experience, which is something that people have a degree of interaction. We don't want to say it's a museum, but we do want to highlight the fact that there is an educational aspect to it.
Yes.
So, for example, if you're coming to the cork, we were just looking around the cork, and the cork really is in 3 phases. There's a third of it is dealing with the trees and the nature and actually what is an extraordinary plant, and in an extraordinary part of Portugal, actually. The next is the sort of more conventional part of how we think of cork, which is what we put in a bottle. But then the last third, as we were discussing earlier, really looks at the new ways that cork's being used. And so I hope that people coming to that will have an experience of understanding more about cork, will learn, will have those wow moments of, gosh, I didn't know that. And that's, every experience is like that, and that's what we're looking at. That's why we're calling them sort of museum experiences.
Right, yeah, that sounds very exciting. The World of Wine has been in development for several years now. It's an enormous project, very exciting. How do you feel now that the opening is approaching?
Well, for me, it started about 7 years ago. So I think one's feeling a mix of both relief that we're coming to the end of the construction phase, and finally we're going to get it open and have a chance to engage with customers and show them this rather exciting project. But also, inevitably, with any opening, there's a huge amount to do, and as you already kindly pointed out, we only have 5 weeks to do it.
The World of Wine, of course, is located in Vila Nova de Gaia, which is opposite the main part of Porto. It's just down the hill behind us from the Yeatman Hotel. Would you like to say a word about this very historic district, Vila Nova de Gaia, which is so linked to the history of port?
Yes, so it's called port wine because obviously it comes from this city. So we always tend to think of Port as the main area. I mean, after all, you land in the city of Maia. You go into Porto, you visit Gaia, you have go to a seafood restaurant in Matosinhos, and you probably take a boat trip up to Gondomar. So I mean, the reality of this whole area is there's lots of little municipal districts, but essentially it's one big city of Porto. And right in the heart of it is the historic port wine lodges area. It's on the south bank and close to the river for obvious reasons. That port used to travel from the Douro on boats and be offloaded here. The north side of the river was a castellated town, so there was nowhere of putting these sort of enormous warehouses. So they were put on the south side. But they are really very much in the heart of the city. And I think, as I say, the fact that the wines matured here are called Vinho do Porto shows you a lot about sort of how central we are.
Certainly does, yes. The architecture, of course, is very distinctive. The lodges, the warehouses with these sloping orange-red roofs. It's incredibly beautiful. Portuguese wines have been gaining a lot of traction in international markets in recent years. Would you like to say a word about why the world of wine is going to be beneficial to Portuguese wine producers?
Well, I think what we're trying to tackle within the wine experience element of the world of wine is we're going to show consumers everything about wine in the sense of how is it made, the importance of the climate, the soil, the grape varieties, the various different factors that influence how a wine turns out. We're obviously using Portugal to help tell that story. So there's a generic story and a Portuguese story on top. But I think what is fascinating is that when you start to use Portugal, one discovers that in fact pretty much all of the subsets of sort of soil combinations that you find anywhere else in the world are actually found here in Portugal. You look at the grape varieties that are planted here in Portugal. We've got all the grape varieties that are planted all over the world, plus a whole load that are only Portuguese. So in a very small country, there is an incredible range and diversity of wines. I think it's very important for consumers who are coming to visit, learning about wine, understanding that here in Portugal there is this fascinating array of wines and flavours and tastes, and they will learn more about that. And I think it is important that they just get this sense of how important Portugal is as a wine producing nation.
Yes. Do you have a favourite Portuguese wine region?
Well, it would be difficult for me not to say the Douro Valley where port comes from, because that's sort of been in my blood for many, many years.
Sure.
It just happens to be probably the most beautiful wine region in the world. So, that's a pretty strong
because of
combination.
the mountainous landscape.
Well, I think actually, I look at the Douro in a number of different ways. I look at it obviously from the beauty of the space and are focused around the river, and the fact that no matter where you are, every angle you get this spectacular view. But I think you've also got to take into consideration the fact that the Douro is only what it is because of the tenacity of mankind to shape the sort of wilderness into a series of terraces and create what is probably one of the most extraordinary man-made landscapes in the world.
Yes.
And I think that's a fantastic combination between what nature gave us and then how man shaped it to his or her own ends. And in doing so, managed to create the conditions that allows us to produce port, which is one of the best wines of the world. So I think, for me, clearly that is where my heart is.
Yes. The Douro is a kind of tale of resilience, isn't it?
It's a resilience, but I think it's also a tale of innovation, because if you look at the Douro, the first question has to be, why did people come here? Surely there must have been easier places to go grow grapes than in the Douro Valley, and yet they did come, and they fashioned that landscape. They have been making wine there since Roman times, so clearly the conditions are extremely good. And I have to say that the Douro Valley is truly one of the most remarkable areas. But of course, it is on the other end of this river, and the Douro itself is a sort of gateway to the region. And of course, the Douro itself drains off the whole of northern Spain as well. So I think the Douro River, or Douro as it is in Spain, goes through 5 different regions, and they're in that one set of 826 kilometre river. On its banks you go through a variety of wine regions and wine styles, and that's the richness of wine.
I have a number of friends in the UK and elsewhere who would probably describe themselves as wine enthusiasts. A suggestion why the world of wine should be at the top of our bucket list today?
Well, I think there's the point about an enthusiast is it's somebody who wants to enjoy it and have fun as much as they want to learn something. And so I think that the approach that we've taken with all of our experiences is, yes, there are elements of education within it, but there's also interaction, there's also immersive entertainment areas, if you like, that allow people to really get the most out of their visit. So I think anybody who has a strong interest in wine, or indeed history, as we have a history section, or there's a drinking vessel collection there which tells an extraordinary story. In one small place we have got a grouping of extraordinary experiences, and this doesn't really exist elsewhere in the world. That's what makes it very fascinating.
No,
of course,
that's very remarkable.
Right in the heart of the city here.
Yes. And what do you think would make Porto a good first destination for somebody after lockdown?
Well, I think if you can have a good crisis, I mean that seems to me to always been a slightly strange way of saying it, but if you can have a good crisis, Portugal's had one, and that is to say that we've had a very low infection rate, we've had a hospital system that has cared and coped incredibly well. We've got disciplines in place that make it incredibly safe, and I think that Portugal is considered one of the safest countries in the world, actually for other reasons prior to this, which were to do with terrorism and so on
yes,
and so
indeed,
forth.
yes, yes.
So, and then it's 2 hours away. All your friends in England can hop on a plane. It's a fairly short plane ride, and I think people will be considering the length of time they're in aeroplanes before they get to their destination, simply because of the potential exposure, as people are at this stage concerned about the opening up. I think once confidence returns, I think that will change a little bit. But we're close by. We are extraordinarily different. I mean, if we look at this landscape behind us, much of this hasn't changed almost since medieval times. There's very few city centres in Europe that can say that. We have, because right on the edge of Europe here, we were not involved in the tragedies of the last centuries' wars that affected so much of the world. Portugal was neutral; it didn't have an impact, and so I think that you get this combination of great sunshine, friendly people, willing to welcome everybody, very open society. We've got good healthcare and good systems in place, so it shows everything is well controlled, and people are absolutely ready to welcome visitors from around the world.
Terrific. Adrian Bridge, this is a wonderfully exciting and inspirational initiative, the World of Wine. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, James, it's a great pleasure, and I know as we were going around, we were able to see all the different corners, and it's very difficult in a short conversation to sort of capture the layers of richness of the world of wine, because we've spoken really only about the experiences, and of course we haven't touched on all the fabulous restaurants that are opening, all the quite interesting shops that'll be there, the wine school and so on. So I think what people will find when they get here is layer upon layer of interesting and fun things to do. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Great, thank
James, thank you.